She thought she could steal someone else's dreams and make them her own. But she had no idea that karma was already planning her wedding gift. Some people believe they can take whatever they want from this world, especially from those they perceive as weaker. This is the story of Pat, a woman whose entitlement knew no bounds, whose manipulations ran deeper than anyone realized, and whose perfect wedding day became the stage for the most poetic justice I've ever witnessed. I'd known Pat for decades, watching her transform from a college opportunist into something far more dangerous. She had this peculiar way of walking like a penguin whenever she wanted pity, a calculated shuffle designed to make people feel sorry for her. It was both despicable and ridiculous, but somehow, it worked. Pat had built her entire identity around one dream: 5 children and a perfect picket fence life. She'd manipulated her way into getting those children, wearing down her husband Hank until he was nothing more than a shadow of himself. 3 jobs weren't enough to satisfy her demands, but she got pregnant anyway, again and again. When Pat reconnected with me through social media, I thought I was being polite by accepting her friend request. I had no idea I was inviting chaos into my life. She began showing up everywhere: my job, my home, my community center events. Her children ran wild through my house during parties, treating my personal space like their playground. When I tried to set boundaries, she'd find loopholes. When I tried to be direct, she'd talk over me, manipulating every conversation back to her needs. But it was what happened to my 13-year-old daughter that changed everything. I'd given my daughter my grandmother's vintage ring to wear for her birthday week. Not expensive, but meaningful, with beautiful bohemian charm that teenage girls adore. When my normally sunny daughter became withdrawn and didn't want to go to school, my husband and I knew something was wrong. The truth came out through her best friend. Pat's 17-year-old daughter Casey had asked to try on the ring and simply refused to give it back. She claimed she'd lost it, then later insisted it was hers. She wore it to school every day, taunting my daughter while spreading rumors that my child was the thief. I confronted Casey in the parking lot after school, demanding to see the jewelry on her hand. She tried to make a fist, but I was relentless. When I slid that ring off her finger and showed Pat the engraving of my grandmother's maiden name, Pat didn't apologize. Instead, she accused me of being overbearing and disrupting her efforts to raise an assertive young woman. A thief. She was raising a thief, and she was proud of it. But Pat's stealing didn't stop with children's jewelry. Our community center ran a beautiful initiative providing free wedding and prom dresses to women in need. Pat had wormed her way into the operation, handling dress shipments under the watchful eye of my friend Lena, who managed the program. When Pat decided to renew her wedding vows, her entitled attitude reached new heights. She bullied another couple into giving up their wedding date, then convinced the farm venue to cut their rates with promises of maintenance work she never intended to fulfill. And then, she set her sights on a particular dress. It was a vintage piece I'd found at a garage sale for $40. Ankle-length white lace, absolutely stunning. But this dress was already assigned to another bride, a young woman who'd fought her way out of welfare, earned her high school diploma, and was working toward her nail technician certificate. This was supposed to be her reward, her moment of beauty. Pat didn't care. She shipped the wrong dress to the assigned bride, claiming it was a mistake. When confronted, she pulled the same move as her daughter. "This is mine." No apology, no shame, just pure entitlement. The other bride was gracious about the mix-up, but we all knew what had happened. Pat had stolen a wedding dress from someone who could barely afford one, someone who deserved that moment of magic more than anyone. Lena banned Pat from the warehouse, but the damage was done. Pat had her stolen dress altered, dyed to deep cream, and decorated with extra beading. She was planning her perfect day built on someone else's dreams. But Lena had other plans. The night before Pat's wedding, Lena called me with a "so sue me" attitude that I'd never heard before. "I'm going to ruin that dress," she said simply. "It's mine to ruin." We snuck into the venue after hours. Pat was staying overnight in the small bridal room, her stolen dress hanging in its garment bag, waiting for her perfect morning. The makeshift chapel was gorgeous. Flowers everywhere, presumptuous details that must have cost a fortune. I'd brought ink, thinking we'd stain the dress, but Lena had something more creative in mind. "She needs to trust the dress is fine," she said. "The surprise should come when it's too late." Lena locked herself in a bathroom stall and carefully cut out the entire back panel of the dress. She put it back on the hanger, zipped the bag, and we left through the emergency exit with the back of the dress stuffed in Lena's purse. The wedding was scheduled for 9 a.m. At 7 a.m., my phone started ringing. I let it go to voicemail, then another, then another. By 8 a.m., curiosity got the better of me. Pat was frantic, crying hysterically. "My dress," she sobbed. "It's missing by half." I played dumb, making her explain every detail while interrupting her just like she'd always done to me. She begged me to lend her my wedding dress. I said no. She asked me to help her find another dress. I reminded her, with great satisfaction, that bridal shops were closed on Sundays, and the open ones were an hour away. Even if she could find a shop, she'd need fittings, steaming, alterations. The venue had to be cleared by noon for the next event. The math was impossible. She hung up on me and called Lena, begging for anything available. What Pat got was the most outdated, moss-smelling, oversized dress from the bottom of Lena's donation pile. Her disappointment was a mixture of fury and devastation. She tried to wear her silk slip as a dress, but it looked obviously cheap. She begged her daughter Casey to give up her own dress, but Casey refused, asking if she was expected to attend the wedding naked. The dress Pat ended up wearing needed a petticoat she didn't have, so it dragged on the ground. She walked down the aisle holding her bouquet in one hand and pulling up her dress with the other. The whole thing was held together with pins that created messy, puckered seams around the neckline and sleeves. She looked uncomfortable, out of place, and absolutely miserable. The reception was a study in contrasts. Princely decorations, a beautiful cake, and a bride in a dress from hell. Pat was so disappointed she spent her own wedding sulking. There was no first dance, no speeches. She changed into a t-shirt and leggings because the dress was too uncomfortable, put on flip-flops, and wandered around aimlessly until she ordered the ushers to start folding chairs. She kicked out her own wedding guests within an hour. The cake was never cut. Pat wasn't the same after that day. The loud, demanding woman who'd bulldozed through everyone's boundaries became quiet, withdrawn. She'd expected people to rescue her, to rally around her crisis, but no one came, not even her own family. Her husband Hank, who'd been ground down to nothing by years of manipulation and emotional abuse, finally found the strength to seek help. Therapy gave him something Pat never could: peace. When she left with the kids again, her usual punishment tactic, he didn't look distraught. He rode his bicycle, mowed his lawn, and seemed relaxed. Hank told my husband he'd contemplated suicide after their third child. But now he was doing things for himself, going out alone, reclaiming his life piece by piece. He filed for divorce on grounds of emotional cruelty. The last I heard, there was some sort of settlement agreement that Pat couldn't interact with him except about the children. Pat slowly pulled away from our community center, removed most of us from her social media, and faded from the social gatherings where she'd once demanded to be the center of attention. Sometimes people think they can steal from others without consequences, especially from those they perceive as vulnerable or powerless. Pat spent years stealing jewelry from children, manipulating situations to her advantage, and finally stealing a wedding dress from a woman who'd fought for every good thing in her life. But here's what people like Pat never understand. The universe has a way of keeping score. When you build your dreams on someone else's tears, when you steal moments of joy from those who've earned them, eventually, the bill comes due. Pat got exactly what she deserved: a wedding day that matched the ugliness of her actions. Her stolen dress became a symbol of her character, beautiful on the surface, but rotten at its core. The real bride, the one whose dress was truly stolen, went on to have her own beautiful wedding day. We made sure of that. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you take away from someone. It's what you give back to the people they tried to hurt. Pat learned the hardest lesson of all. You can't steal someone else's happiness and expect to keep it. In the end, Karma doesn't just visit, it RSVPs to your wedding, and it always arrives right on time.